Hello, welcome to this webinar. My name is Kate Bush. I am the coordinator for programs and services at the ALS Society of Quebec. I am very happy today to welcome Rachel Thibeault. Rachel is an occupational therapist who holds a PhD in psychology. Rachel was for nearly 3 decades a professor at the Faculty of Health Sciences of the University of Ottawa, Canada. She has developed expertise in psychological resilience and peer support in complex situations such as conflict and post-conflict areas, and has worked worldwide as a clinician, researcher, and trainer. She also has clinical experience with people living with ALS. In recognition of her contributions to the field of mental health, she has received the title of Officer of the Order of Canada, the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Canadian Society of International Health, and honorary degrees. Now a consultant, she provides training and support to a broad range of settings, from medical agencies and governmental organizations to war and cancer survivors, to name a few. Welcome, Rachel.
Well, thank you very much, Kate. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. As you mentioned, as an occupational therapist, I've had the opportunity to work with people with ALS, and I've really tried to combine this clinical experience with the newest research in neuroscience along the lines of resilience. So without further ado, I'm going to share my PowerPoint and we can delve in the heart of the topic. So I take for granted that everything is working well.
Yes, thank you.
And as the title says today, what we're going to look at are, in fact, very simple strategies to bring about more resilience, more well-being. Some are meant with the people living with ALS, and some are meant for the people accompanying, providing care to the people with ALS. And you will see that quite a few, in fact, overlap between the two groups. So who am I? I mean, Kate described it, so I'm not going to say much more. But I just want to add that even now, although I've left the University of Ottawa, I'm still doing research on resilience with other universities, the University of Montreal being one of them. So what are we going to talk about today? First of all, if we speak about resilience, we are going to define the term. Then we're going to look at the most basic physical prerequisites to resilience. I guess it's no surprise to anyone that body and mind are really intimately connected. And in the field of resilience, we really want to make sure that we don't divide them up, that we really always approach the body and the mind simultaneously. So if we speak about psychological resilience, we're going to look at the optimal physical conditions that are conducive to resilience. Then we're going to look at a new kind of strategies that came up in neuroscience over the past couple of years. That's called hormetic stress training. We will continue with another tool from neuroscience called the compassion protocol. We're going to look at the notion of grieving because with all degenerative diseases, we know that the body image is in constant change. There's always some losses that are accompanied by grieving. And we will look at the new research on how to adapt to all those changes. And we're going to end on a small tool that's quite useful to gradually build resilience in our lives. And that tool is called micro resolutions. So this whole presentation's been designed around some challenges that are associated with degenerative conditions. Because we know that when we live with a degenerative disease like ALS, there's always that hope in the background for new scientific discoveries. And sometimes it tends to pull us outside daily life in a realm that's a bit cut off from what's happening. As I was mentioning earlier, too, I mean, there's that phenomenon of the body image that needs readjustments, that meaning and identity also have to be redefined as the disease progresses. There's always the fear of the unknown because even when people share diagnostic label, we all know that each situation is unique. We know also that ALS is associated with a feeling of exhaustion. And when we look at all this, we realize that it really adds up to significant psychological challenges. And it makes cultivating one's resilience very important, both for the people living with ALS and for their loved ones. So let's define resilience. And I know that quite often resilience is defined in the literature as the capacity to resist adversity. And yes, it's a definition that we see quite frequently, but in real life, it's the wrong one. Because if I take the word resist, it really implies that if I'm really facing hard times, my reaction is just going to take it in, resist, and keep going. And we all know this is not how human beings react. In fact, the real definition of resilience is the capacity to bounce back in a timely manner to adapt. And if I say bounce back, it means that I've been destabilized and that I've fallen. And in today's definition of resilience, in fact, we incorporate the whole process. It means that I face hard times, I'm destabilized, I may even collapse. But the idea is to bounce back. And often people tell me, well, these are just words, doesn't really matter. In fact, the definition of resilience that I'm going to adopt is going to be absolutely key to how I react to adversity. And I'm just giving you an example from my experience. I've been working for the past 35 years with a broad range of armed forces all over the world. And it's interesting that some really train their military with the first definition. And they tell them, you know, guys, you're going to be deployed in a situation where it's going to be really rough. And they tell them, but if you're resilient, you're going to be able to resist and keep going. The armed forces that send that message in the end up with a whole lot more soldiers with severe PTSD. Because what happens when suddenly they're faced with situations that are overwhelming and when they lose their balance, they immediately believe that it indicates they have no resilience. And it triggers in them a sense of weakness, followed by a sense of helplessness, and then followed by a sense of hopelessness. They feel, well, I'm not good enough for this. I know I'm about to collapse and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. That's with the first definition. When we train the soldiers with the second definition, we usually start up the same way. We tell them, listen, guys, you're going to be deployed in situations that are going to be extremely difficult. And we add, these situations may be overwhelming. And so it's likely you're going to be destabilized and you may even collapse. And we add just a few extra words. And this is all normal. And we explain that resilience is not about not collapsing. Resilience is about meeting what is and learning to bounce back. And when we train the soldiers with the second definition, when they end up in situations that they do find overwhelming, they no longer panic because they can reframe. They remember their training and they think, okay, I'm having a very rough time right now. I'm really losing my balance. I may even collapse, but it's not the end of the road. I know that with the right tools, I will be able to bounce back. And what we see clinically is way fewer soldiers with PTSD and people who manage to navigate the roughest waters in life and still come out of it at the end with their full potential. So, our very first tool for resilience is really going to be the definition we choose. And I sure hope you will choose the second one. I also have to tell you that we have two kinds of resilience. One is called survival resilience, the other one is called well being resilience. Survival resilience is what I see, for example, when I'm in a war zone. I'm just back from Ukraine. I came back about a week ago. And what I see there is often people, for example, will step on a landmine. So they step on a landmine, they lose a limb, and their reaction is really to put really a tourniquet, clench their teeth, and really try to gather up all the internal, external resources to survive. They're in there thinking, okay, I've lost a leg. I may have to crawl for 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers. I don't care. I want to live. And quite often they do because of that survival resilience. They have this really drive again to gather all they've got to the service of survival. And clearly, it works. It's a very useful mechanism in human beings, but we have to realize that it's not something that we can use for a prolonged period. It is so demanding in terms of energy that survival resilience only works for emergency situations and on a very, very short term. And so, what we need to do to build resilience is, in fact, to move from survival resilience, which is what our brain wants to do on a regular basis. Our brain is wired for survival resilience. Even when we're faced with just a small obstacle in our way, our brain will have the tendency to get out the heavy artillery, to move immediately into survival resilience and to solicit all the resources we've got. It's really an overreaction. But again, that's the way the brain is wired. So we have to move from that and go into what's called well-being resilience. Well-being resilience is about stepping back and looking at our life habits, finding those habits that are conducive to resilience and cultivating them, and identifying those that are detrimental to resilience and bit by bit getting rid of them. And the whole thing with well-being resilience is about a very gentle, gradual process. Well-being resilience is something you do gently, softly, bit by bit over time. And what we know is that, in fact, that gradual, gentle building of resilience is the best strategy to become stronger. So, what are the main physical prerequisites for optimal cognitive performance, which is a first prerequisite for resilience? I explain the process. When I'm faced with something difficult, my first reaction is for my mind to go in all directions, a little bit like a chicken with its head cut off. And in order to prevent my mind to go into all directions, there are some things I can do physically to calm myself, to create conditions conducive to a calm mind and resilience. These two things are sufficient sleep. And if you had to keep one lesson from today's presentation, it would be this one. Protecting our sleep is, in fact, the best strategy we can have, both for physical and psychological resilience. And the second strategy is to do a bit of regular exercise. So let's look at them in a bit more detail. When we speak about sleep, it's absolutely essential to protect, especially deep sleep, because we've discovered over the past few years a key system that we knew nothing about. I'm not going to go into all the scientific details, but we've discovered a system in the brain that's a little bit like its cleaning crew. At regular intervals during the night, this crew gets going and literally cleans up the brain. All the cellular metabolites, the debris, the junk gets cleaned up by this system called the glymphatic system. But for this system to get activated and to do its job, we need to have periods of deep sleep. So, how do we protect that? The first strategy will be to sleep between 7.5 to 8.5, even 9 hours per night, if possible. We know that a normal night is 5 cycles of 90 minutes each. That's the minimum. And you've got some outliers. Some people may need a bit less, some may need a bit more. But on average, between 7.5 to 8.5 hours of sleep is what we need to really have sufficient time for our brain to go into the deep sleep mode. We need to keep our room dark and cool. And in fact, the latest research indicates that the main obstacle to sleep is not sound, it's not temperature, it's light. That's what we're most sensitive to. So, and I share my strategy. Now I always sleep with a mask. I want to make sure that light won't interfere with my natural cycle. We need also to always get up at the same time to regulate sleep. We really thought that sleep was quite adaptable, but we realized, in fact, that it's not. We need to have pretty much the same schedule on weekdays and weekends, because even if I shift my sleep schedule by about half an hour, something that may look minor, my body will take up to 3 days to readjust to that small change. So if I have a weekend schedule and a week schedule, it means that my sleep is going to be in constant disruption. And I realize that this requires some discipline, but if we want to have optimal sleep, we need to learn to get up pretty much at the same time, 7 days a week. Because light is the main enemy of sleep, we also need to dim all lights a few hours before bed. And I look at the changes I've brought in my life. For example, in my bathroom, I now have a dimmer and I put it at the lowest setting because before going to bed, because if I get up at night to go to the washroom, I don't want to have, arena lighting just stimulating all my daytime hormones and complicating my falling back to sleep. So I dim all lights before going to bed and even in my bathroom. And by the way, just an aside, for reasons we don't quite understand yet, LEDs seem to have more of an impact on sleep than regular light bulbs. So if you have LEDs in your home, make sure that you dim them. If you have to put a dimmer somewhere, put them on your LEDs. We also need to monitor closely our caffeine intake. We thought the half-life was between 4 to 7 hours. More recent research indicates that it may even go up to 10 hours. What that means is that if I have, let's say, a cup of coffee at noon, 10 hours later, so at 10 o'clock at night, I will still have 50% of the caffeine in my bloodstream, and it will be enough to prevent me from reaching my states of deep sleep. So we recommend that coffee, caffeinated beverages are kept for the morning. Another element that's new, we need to expose ourselves to morning light. For decades, we thought that the whole sleep process and the sleep hormones were triggered after 6 or 7 o'clock at night. We realized we were wrong. That whole process of falling asleep at night, in fact, starts at the very moment we open our eyes in the morning. If, as pretty much as early as I can after getting up, I expose myself to morning light, it gives my brain the signal that the day has started, and it will start producing hormones that are kind of the precursors of the hormones I will need at night to fall asleep. And so what I do, and now my neighbors have gotten used to it, even when in wintertime, even when it's overcast, even when I'm still in my pajamas, I put my coat on, my boots on, I go on my balcony right after getting up with my cup of coffee, and I expose myself to morning light, even if it's cloudy. I stay there for about 2, 3 minutes, and then I come back in. And that brief exposure is sufficient to give my brain the signal it needs to pave the way for good sleep at night. We also need to monitor alcohol. I was telling you about the importance of getting our deep sleep. If we drink alcohol less than 3 hours before going to bed, The alcohol is going to flatten our sleep curve and, in fact, inhibit our deep sleep. So it means that the sleep I need most is going to be taken away from me because of my alcohol a few hours before bed. So again, we recommend as much as possible not to drink at night. And not long ago, I went to a conference given by a sleep expert who was saying, half jokingly, that if you want to get drunk, do it at breakfast time. It's the best time in your day. So I don't necessarily advocate for that, but there's still some wisdom in there. And also, what's going to help us is to do a bit of exercise during the day. And you will see that it's not necessarily something, like a marathon. So if we speak about exercise, we need to speak about something else called metabolic slowdown. Metabolic slowdown is what the body does when we remain, when there's, sedentarity for a prolonged period. And when we look at our lifestyle, we have to admit that we do spend a whole lot of time sitting. And it's exactly the opposite of what the human body is designed to do. If we lived the way our ancestors lived, we would be fairly active during the day. We would move, we would do all kinds of things, and once in a while, we would sit down to rest. Modern life really brings a 180-degree change from that lifestyle. We sit most of the time, and once in a while, we move. So when we do that, we really trigger metabolic slowdown. It's because our body suddenly senses that, well, nothing's going on. No emergency, we're not moving. So the body just chooses to switch into energy conservation mode, feeling nothing coming up. Let's go dormant. And we're not meant to go into dormancy at such a rate during the day. And what happens when our body goes into that sleep mode, almost, all aspects of health get affected. I will have heart issues and lung issues, muscle issues, brain issues. I mean, even cognitively, it will become more difficult for me to focus, to maintain attention, just because I'm so sluggish because of that metabolic slowdown. So, how do we counteract the sluggishness that we have from all that sitting? I want to bring here an important analogy, and it's what happens with our computer screens. If I don't use my computer, the screen, I know, whoops, it moves into sleep mode. And what I also know is that I don't need, to hit the thing or write up a whole document for my screen to come back on. Just a slight touch on the keyboard suddenly wakes it up. And we're quite lucky because it's something similar with the human body. What we found out is that we fall into metabolic slowdown after about 90 minutes of sitting down. So if I don't move for 90 minutes, my body understands nothing serious happening. Let's go dormant, and I fall into metabolic slowdown. So every 90 minutes, if we do something simple, 1 or 2 minutes of gentle, preferably moderate or vigorous exercise. But if you live with ALS, gentle exercise will do. And so every 90 minutes, we need to move. What I do, again, I share all my tips. I've got some free weights next to my desk. There's a song I absolutely love. It's Happy by Pharrell Williams. So every 90 minutes, I've got this good old unfashioned timer. I put it for 90 minutes. When it rings, I just put Pharrell Williams on and I do weights for about 1 minute. And I'm telling you, when I sit back down to do my work, I really feel all turned on again. My brain's back online, my body's back online, just with a very little bit of exercise. And if you want really the bare bone regimen to have those 2 minutes every 90 minutes to prevent metabolic slowdown, you can add about 30 minutes 5 times per week of moderate cardio or even gentler exercise. And this second part, its purpose is more to help us actually, I would say, control our natural anxiety. So if you pair both strategies, I've got 2 minutes every 90 minutes, and I have about 30 minutes 5 times per week. And again, here, I really want to highlight, we'll speak about exercise a bit later on, only if you've been recently diagnosed with ALS, because as you know, exercise can trigger real exhaustion, so you don't want to overdo it. So you do what you can at the pace you can, but while making sure that you don't fall into exhaustion. The other strategy that's going to help us build resilience is doing explicit training for stress. But I want to say right off the bat that we do not train for resilience while in the midst of high stress. I currently work in Ukraine, both in person and online, and I work with the healthcare providers on the front lines, amongst other groups. And it's clear that I'm not going to tell a physician who's right at the front lines, well, you've got to do some stress training. That's not the proper time. What I tell them is when you're on the front lines, you do what you can, you do your job, period. When you're on a rotation, when you come back to a place where life is no longer frantic, where you're not in the midst of a crisis, then you can try training for resilience, but never in crisis mode. And this specific kind of training is called hormetic stress training. And it means that I'm going to stress my body on purpose to teach it to recover better and faster. So let's look at this a bit more closely. Hormesis is a term that has to do with a phenomenon where the same substance will have opposite effects depending on dosage. Often I give the example of zinc. Let's say I've got a bit of a cold coming up. I know that if I take very small doses of zinc, between 5 and 10 milligrams per day, and just for 3 days, chances are I won't catch the cold. I will nip it in the bud, but I may also shorten its duration or its intensity. But my dose of zinc has got to be no more than 10 milligrams and for no more than 3 days. If I'm overzealous and I decide I'm really going to, nip this thing right off the bat, and I take 100 milligrams for several days, I will fall into the toxicity zone and I'm going to be very sick. And so zinc and stress are a bit the same. Zinc and stress in small doses are absolutely great for the body. In high doses, they are dangerous. And so, hormetic stress, it's about taking stress in small doses in order to enhance my health. So, what does hormetic stress do? What is it? It really changes our response to stress and it makes it shorter. Normally, let's say I've got sudden stress. I'm thinking, oh, am I going to be able to catch my train or my bus or my plane? And I've got this peak of stress. And if I catch my bus or train or plane, then I will relax, but the response is very slow. The relaxation will come back, so the stress will decrease along a very gradual curve. What we want to teach the body is not to have this long curve, but to have just a peak, up and down, period, no lingering on. And really have the body behave like a light switch. I turn the stress on, I turn the stress off. Very short. Because what we know when we have those peak of stress, and I was saying, just like with zinc, a bit of a jolt is very good. It triggers in our cells a phenomenon called autophagy. And literally, what it means is that if I have this jolt of stress, suddenly my body feels, there's something unknown coming down the pipeline, better clean house. And the body literally cleans up the cells, does a really fantastic job at cleaning up all the junk. And that's what we do. We want to stress the body just enough to get the cleaning process going. So, how does it work? It's a little bit like if I shot myself with a microdose of stress, like a vaccine. When the body encounters it again, it recognizes it and knows how to metabolize it. It knows I've seen this before, this stress, I know what to do with it. And what is really fabulous, and this is new knowledge, is that by stressing my body, in fact, I learned to better handle physical stressors. But curiously, I also learned to handle better psychological stressors. We don't understand how it works, but we observe that the more I teach my body to deal with discomfort and stress, the more I teach my mind to do the same. And so hormetic stress is really considered the best protective shield at the cellular level against chronic stress. So how do we train in actual life? We will inflict upon ourselves three kinds of physical discomfort: a form of exercise, high intensity interval training, thermal shocks, hot or cold, and hypoxic breathing. So if we look at these strategies, I want to highlight that they're meant for caregivers and loved ones because we know that if you have ALS, even moderate exercise can trigger increased fatigue, muscle cramps, twitching, pain, soreness, and difficulty performing daily tasks. We also know that people with ALS should be cautious about adding aerobic exercise if they have shortness of breath. You don't want to exacerbate the issue. And we know also that in people with ALS, if you do vigorous exercise, high intensity exercise, it stress what we call fast twitch muscle fibers, type 2, and it will worsen some of the symptoms. So what I'm describing now is meant more for caregivers and loved ones. So high intensity interval training, HIIT, it's all about brief bouts of intense exercise at 80% of heart capacity with pauses, and the whole thing may last from 7 to 12 minutes. What I do, for example, in my about 5 times a week, I run for about 3 minutes flat out, 80% of my heart capacity. Then I walk for 1 minute, 1 minute or two. I do it a second time, and I'm done for the day. I've done my hormetic stress training. Again, I just want to stretch the body enough to turn on the recovery process, and we do it several times a week. The best strategy, but the most unpopular, is the good old cold shower. So you stay, it's immersion in cold water at 14 degrees for 20 to 30 seconds. And what it does, it immediately boosts metabolism by 350%. It really gives you a jolt that will improve your mood, trigger greater calm, and give you more energy. And I want to highlight how I do it. In my shower, I've established with a good old bucket when I reach 14 degrees. So I really left a mark on my dial where 14 degrees is. And so I walk into a nice, pleasant shower. And at the end of my shower, I bring the water down to 14 degrees and I stay there for about 25, 30 seconds. And what's important is to end my shower on that cold period. And if you do that, you will really feel that it has quite a positive impact on your day. It's better than exercise, and obviously you need to be in good cardiac health. But again, if you do it gradually, it's much less taxing for the heart. Again, people with ALS should avoid the cold because it increases symptoms. You can also go with hot shocks, but to me, it's something I don't have time to fit into my schedule because with a sauna, for example, it takes an hour to an hour and a half to reach the core temperature necessary to trigger hormetic stress. So I've forgotten that one. And the hypoxic breathing, basically, it's something simple. It's just fundamentally cyclical hyperventilation. You take vigorous, deep, fast inhales, and you have powerful exhales, but not all the way. You keep some residual air in the lungs, and you do that for about 30 seconds. If you're not dizzy, you do 3 cycles. You may even add a step where you hold your breath. And what happens there is that the body, the bloodstream suddenly has way more oxygen than normal, and it triggers the hormetic stress response. So in my life, I've embedded mostly, as I said, the HIIT, the shower, and the hypoxic breathing. But again, with ALS, hypoxic breathing, not breathing, but breathing can aggravate shortness of breath. And so it's preferred to be avoided. So once we've taken care of the body, let's look at the mind and let's look at a tool that comes from neuroscience that's called the compassion protocol. And it comes from observations in neuroscience to the effect that when we're in context, when we either receive or give compassion, it's got very significant impacts on both body and mind. and on both the person who gives compassion and the person who receives it. So when we are really in a compassionate environment, what we're going to see is an increase in the happiness hormone called oxytocin. What we're also going to see is a decrease in stress hormones like cortisol. We're going to see decreased inflammation. So if we have asthma, for example, the symptoms will be lessened. The blood pressure will drop. We will feel less pain. We will have increased immunity. Our mood will become more stable and better. And as far as we know, with our current knowledge, the compassion protocol is our best protective factor psychologically. So let's see how it works. In research, compassion is defined as a cognitive, emotional, and volitional response when faced with suffering, our own or the suffering of others. Cognitive, we understand. Emotional, we also understand. Volitional means that comes from the will. And what it also means is that compassion is not a reflex response for humans. And it means that we will have to make that choice. Our brain will not go there on its own. Let's look at it really in terms of what happens in the brain. Let's say a friend of mine tells me that she's just lost her mother. My first reaction will be something called theory of mind. It's my cognitive response. When my friend tells me about her mom, immediately I will attribute to her some feelings and thoughts and intentions. So I will think, for example, oh, well, she must be really sad right now. Her schedule must be upside down. Maybe she will have to take time off work. I wonder what her mom died of. So as you can see, I can put myself in her shoes to a certain extent, but just in a very rational manner. And it's all fine. We keep it, but we keep going along the way. We move into empathy. And in empathy, I will have an emotional response. I will tell my friend, tell me more about what happened and tell me, how you feel. Explain to me what you experience at the moment. And in that stage, I will try to resonate with my friend in terms of her emotions. I will maybe even remember how I felt when my own mother died. And what my friend will feel is that I'm not just connecting with the mind, I'm connecting with the heart. And it will create a bond that will really help her kind of feel less alone, less lonely, and she will feel that really I'm there for her. And because I allow some emotion, my voice will change, my face muscles will change, my body language will change, and she will feel we're connected. And all this is fine, but there's a danger. We know that our mind, our brain amplifies what's negative. And so I know that if I stay there for too long in that resonance of her pain, her mom has died, I'm thinking of my mom when she died, and we resonate back and forth, we're at risk of amplifying and being overwhelmed by suffering because all our respective mental spaces are filled with suffering. So what I'm going to do when I sense that the emotion is getting too strong, I will switch channels switch gears. I will move into compassion, and I will make sure my mind is no longer focused on suffering, that my mind is really focused on my desire to bring some comfort. And I will want to act. So at this stage, I will ask my friend, listen, I will tell my friend, listen, I know you're overwhelmed right now. I suspect you don't have time to cook. I've just cooked a big batch of spaghetti sauce. I'm bringing you some. Maybe you don't have time to take care of take your kids back and from the daycare. I will do it for you. In the compassion stage, my aim is to bring comfort in whatever way I can. And sometimes people tell me, well, this is just words, empathy, compassion, it's all the same. It's really not. And we have to understand it's really not. If I look in my brain, what happens during that sequence, again, initially, when I'm at the theory of mind stage, these are the cognitive areas getting activated. When I move to empathy, the blue areas are my empathy areas, but two of them are what I call double agents. If I activate them too much, if I reach a certain threshold, suddenly they change function. They no longer make me feel empathy, they make me feel profound, crushing distress. So I have to make sure that I remain below this critical threshold. And how do I know that I'm getting close to this threshold? We will see two means of figuring it out. Because what I want to do is to remain below the threshold and go activate the areas in red, the areas of compassion, all associated with positive affects and resilience. That's where I want my brain to go. So, what I want my brain to do is to shift gears again. In empathy, my brain produces cortisol, stress hormones. Oh, I suffer and my friend suffers. And, you know, stress hormones are produced. In compassion, I want to bring comfort. And it's oxytocin, the happiness hormone, that's produced. Empathy for too long will bring me to collapse. Compassion will bring me to resilience. It's a bit like a train trying to find the right tracks. My brain wants to remain in empathy. And if I don't switch tracks, I will hit the wall of what we called empathic or empathetic distress, what we used to call compassion fatigue. And that's where my brain wants to go. My reaction, not to hit the wall, maybe to turn left and say, okay, with my friend, I'm going to be cold and mechanical and rational. I won't let emotions come into play because it's dangerous. I will go into emotional shutdown. If I go there, it's no better because my brain is designed to experience empathy. And if I try to extinguish it, I'm going also to get into distress. So the only tracks that work are the tracks of compassion and self-compassion. And the thing that will make sure that I don't hit the wall is a very simple question. What comfort, even banal, even minimal, can I offer in the here and now to myself or to others? To myself if I'm distraught, to others if they are distraught. And so if it's with others, it's very simple. I will ask the person to describe what they experience. Tell me what's happening. Then I will validate and normalize the emotions. Like with my friend, if she tells me, if she starts crying and tells me, I feel really sorry, I'm sobbing, I will tell her, it's normal. You've just lost your mom. Don't worry. So she gets two messages from me. I'm there. I embrace her situation. I don't judge. I'm there for her. Then, as I said, I will try to resonate with her emotion and then focus on what can I do to help you feel better right now. And at the end of our conversation, I will want to offer ongoing support. I will tell her, like, it's really tough today, and I'm here for you, and I'm happy to be here for you. We'll go through this together, and I will be there for you for the duration. And if I cannot be there, I will tell her together we'll find someone who can be there for you. But again, I have to be careful not to be engulfed into empathy and suffering. So I have to read my warning signs. And I will have two types of warning signs to help me distinguish between empathy and compassion. The first signs will come from my body. And what I have here is literally in fact, the trajectory of the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the nerve that really is associated with my heart and my lungs and my bowels. It's the nerve that creates the bridge often between my emotions and my body. And so it's the nerve that's going to tell me where I am in my process. So if I suddenly realize, let's say with my friend, that I'm just leaning forward and I'm all tensed up, I really want to take her suffering on my shoulders. So I feel a tightening in the chest. I've got this muscle tension, even my shoulders tend to rise. I so want to help. My breathing gets shallower. My body's telling me, time out. You're about to fall into the trap of intense emotion, overwhelming emotion. You're into excessive empathy. And so I will have literally to sit back. So I will bring my body back just a little bit. I will keep a posture of openness. I want again to keep some empathy with my friend, but not all tensed up. And I will think of what kind of comfort can I give her right now. It could be compassionate words, it could be a kind gesture, it could be an offer to help, whatever it is. But I make sure that I reframe in terms of comfort. And I need to keep my mind on that track for about 40 seconds to diffuse again my vagus nerve, to diffuse my train that really wants to go into the wall. And if for 40 seconds I keep that intention of trying to figure out what would bring comfort, I will be free of that tension that could, in the end, bring me down. I also need to look at my thoughts and see where I fit on the emotional sequence. Do I feel pity for my friend? Am I thinking, oh, it's so terrible? I mean, nothing can be done. If it's the case, I acknowledge that feeling in me. I embrace it. I don't judge myself. I just tell myself that's what I feel right now, but it's not a constructive emotion. Let's move on. So I may move to sympathy and say, I'm so worried about my friend. How is she going to handle, that period of grieving? Again, I will embrace where I am, feeling, oh, I'm experiencing sympathy It's normal, it's fine, but again, it's not the most constructive emotion. So I will move towards empathy, where I'm going to try again to resonate with my friend, but ultimately, I want to come back squarely into compassion, where what's done is to help bring comfort. And we don't judge ourselves for any of these emotions. They're all normal. We embrace them when they show up, but with the less constructive ones, we make sure that we don't stay stuck at that stage. And obviously, we're going to try to give ourselves some self-compassion. And what is self-compassion? It's treating ourselves with kindness, the way we would do for a close friend, someone we really love dearly. So it means that we will give ourselves some kindness. I mean, time to just go sip a cup of tea and feel better. Uh, Time to or be less harsh on ourselves when we feel that we haven't done everything we wanted to do. And we'll take time also to pay attention to all the good we bring around us and not just our shortcomings. So we will make sure in our daily life that we leave room for taking good care of ourselves. We also know, as we mentioned before, that with degenerative diseases, conditions, there's a process of mourning, of grieving over time. So, what's the better way to do it? In some cases, we know that people still use Elizabeth Kubler-Ross theories. I mean, they were very good, but we've built on them since. And we've realized, especially in degenerative diseases, that we have to alternate between times where we process loss and rebuilding routines. It's like a seesaw. And when we talk about processing loss, we compare it to looking at the sun. We know that we cannot look at the sun, I mean, on an ongoing basis. It's going to hurt our eyes. It's the same thing with grieving. We cannot just think of the losses that we experience. So we need at some point to avert the gaze, look at something different. And here it's all going to be about rebuilding routines. So those routines will be rebuilt bit by bit and not any old way. We are going to rebuild our routines around something called intentional eudaimonic activities. It's in fact a fancy term to say activities that really are conducive to resilience. So let's look at them. Let's draw a parallel. If I want to improve my physical health, I know that I will have to do a range of exercises. I would need to do resistance training and cardio and stretching for flexibility and work on my balance and my gross and fine motor skills. I couldn't say, well, I want to be in top shape, but I'm just going to do stretching, nothing else. We know it won't work. It's a package. I need to take some of each area. If I want to improve my psychological health, it's the same phenomenon. I cannot just pick and choose. I have to do basic psychological exercises that will improve my mental health. And what I need to improve is my inner calm, my capacity for attention, my creativity, meaning in my life, meaning beyond my immediate self, and my sense of connectedness with life. And so I cannot just pick and choose. I will need to do 5 types of exercises that we're going to look at one by one. And we've named them with all C's so that we remember them more easily. So centering, contemplation, creativity, contribution, and connectedness. So what is centering about? Centering is about sometimes the agitation we all feel at some point in our lives. We have this bit of anxiety that's like an obstacle between ourselves and our capacity to just feel at peace. There's always a bit of residual agitation. How do we get rid of it? We've got 2 main strategies. We can do vigorous physical exercise. We can go jogging or use a jumping rope, whatever. But another strategy that is well designed for people with ALS, because it doesn't require, physical exercise, is anything that creates order, tidying up. So it could be doing the dishes very slowly, and we've all experienced it as we clean, let's say, a mound of dirty dishes. We can really feel that as we create outer order, there's a sense of peacefulness that sets inside. We create inner order. And it's been tested with things as simple as cleaning up your desktop with your computer. Doesn't require any kind of exertion, and yet you have this impact of calmness. The second type of activity is called contemplation, sometimes called mindfulness, and it can be formal or informal meditation, prayer, quiet attention that allow for sustained mindfulness. And we have, in fact, many forms of mindfulness. And often people feel, well, it's got to be sitting in a lotus position on a cushion, always motionless. No, we can have mindfulness while moving. I often give the example of what I do. I call it contemplative swimming. I'm a really bad swimmer, but in summertime, I love swimming in lakes, doing the old, breaststroke, just feeling the sun on my face, looking at nature around me, the plants around the lake. And it is a form of mindfulness. And ideally, what we should embed in our days, it's 20 to 30 minutes per day of sustained mindfulness. So it could be taking a bath with a candle, with maybe a bit of essential oil, and just being there, enjoying the warmth of the water, the scent of the essential oil, nothing else, just being and emptying our mind to the extent we can. And the other form of mindfulness we need to embed is very, very brief moments of gratitude and awe in our daily life. I'm fortunate I live near the Rideau River, and just this morning on my balcony, there was a group of blue jays. And just to see them, I mean, the beautiful feathers, I took less than 20 seconds to look at the blue jays on my balcony, and I could feel it was a reset. I was in a frenzy before. Those 20 seconds just reset me into a totally different mood, and way of being. And we know that it's when we use both the extended periods and those small moments, just brief periods, embedded throughout the day, that we gain the most from mindfulness. And we need to respect 4 core principles. In those moments, we don't attempt to communicate. We don't attempt to solve a problem. We don't judge what emerges. If we have weird ideas, thoughts, we just embrace them and let them go. And we focus on compassion. We know about mindfulness that we have two kinds. The traditional kind is called awareness mindfulness, and that's the kind of mindfulness where we learn to focus on our breath or, the flame of a candle, and we always bring back our attention on a specific focus. It will provide us with real attentional benefits. We will learn to focus our attention much better, but we realize that it's not going to improve our stress reactivity or our resilience. If instead of doing this awareness mindfulness, we do acceptance mindfulness, we improve our stress reactivity and our resilience. And what's the difference? Let's say I focus on my breathing and I have a thought. The thought, well, a close friend is having chemotherapy today. And we know that when we do mindfulness, we're told to just let the thoughts go like a cloud in the sky. So I have this thought of my friend having chemotherapy. In awareness mindfulness, I just let it go. In acceptance mindfulness, I just attach to it some kindness, some compassion. I add to that thought, I hope her session goes well, and I hope the outcome is good. And then I let the thought go. If I have a thought, let's say I was expecting a promotion and I didn't get it, and I have this thought emerging, I'm so jealous of the person who got it. When the thought emerges, I embrace it, feeling, oh, yes, I feel really jealous. And I just attach to it, and I'm going to be kind to myself because it hurts. And then I let the thought go. We realize that when we attach compassion to anything we do, we end up with much improved resilience. And again, I want to highlight no mindfulness in the midst of a crisis. We do distraction instead. So our third activity is creativity. So any activity that allows us to give shape to something that we find nice and beautiful, or activities where we enjoy what others have created. And it doesn't have to be art. It could be a great meal, and it could be something as silly as just writing a nice email. Because what brings resilience is not the end product. What brings resilience is my desire to create something beautiful and good. So if I want to create a nice email, my intention will bring me resilience. Contribution, really, it's all the activities that allow us to give back, to be valued member of our community. And even when we have little mobility, sometimes just comforting words, jokes, sharing some humor will be forms of contribution. And connectedness, it's all about connecting with human beings, but also connected with plants, with animals, anything that in us and around us really strengthen our sense of belonging to a community and to life in general. And so all this is a bit like a menu. We have our activities, like what are the activities that help me get rid of my agitation? And here are my answers. What do I do when I want a better focus? What is it I like to create? What do I do to give back around me? And what do I do to connect with life around me? So not just give back, but really connect, like in gardening and enjoying my Blue Jays this morning. And so we jot down those activities that really speak to us so we can go back to them as we would for a menu when we structure our time during the week. And again, we do all this, but no mindfulness when the distress is acute. So I come back to this exercise regimen. We've just seen 5 types of activities that will build resilience. And in different measures, we will all try to embed them in our weekly schedule. Again, alternating those periods when we're mourning because of some loss, and we will, in response, do an activity that will build our resilience. And I just want to add that we have to be aware of something that could be called junk activity. And I want to make a parallel with junk food. Let's say if I told you that I eat pizza and drink beer 7 days a week, 3 times a day, but on Friday evenings, I make sure to have a green salad and a sparkling water. You're going to tell me, don't bother on Friday evenings. You eat so poorly that nothing could help your poor nutrition at that point. And you would be right. But if I told you I eat really, really well, and on Friday evenings, I love pizza and beer, you will tell me, go for it. You eat so well during the week that there's no problem with having pizza and beer one evening a week. What we realized is that resilient people deal with their activities a bit the way we deal with our food. They make sure that the 5 types of activities we've just talked about are really embedded in their week before they do junk activities. So what could be junk activities? Playing online blackjack nonstop. That would be a problem. Mine is watching news compulsively. Bad for me. I have difficulty controlling myself. Everybody's got some junk activity, like everybody's got some junk food somewhere. The key is to know where and try to counterbalance it. I won't go into too many details looking at the time, but psychological research and eudaimonic intentional activity research over the past 20 years has shown that the 5 activities that are essential for our resilience are gradually disappearing from our society. What you see on the graph is the white and the yellow are those activities that feed the soul. The red is the time spent in front of a screen for entertainment purposes only. The phenomenon that we see, and even more so since COVID, is that the activities that build resilience are displaced by screen-based activities. So we need to reestablish a balance. And that doesn't mean that we're going to become fanatical about, good living. Sometimes we will allow what's called ugly coping. What ugly coping is, it's behaviors that may not be always healthy, that actually are not healthy ordinarily, but we may allow ourselves a little bit of it at times just to let some steam out. And I was giving an example, about 10 days ago now, I was still in Ukraine, and I was in an area where, tension was high, and a lot of my colleagues smoke. I've never smoked in my life, but last week I smoked for the first time because what I needed most was a sense of connectedness. And it was with the smokers that I would get the connectedness. But I knew very well that my smoking was contained in time. When I came back to Canada, I didn't go out to buy cigarettes. It was really in at that moment in time, but I needed it then, and I allowed myself to have it then. And I'm ending with a tool for gradual change. And it's all about building on very small successes. It's called micro resolutions. And it's been found to be one of the most successful paths for permanent change. And what it is, it's just choosing something that is so simple and that we will really get gains from. I give an example with everything that we've seen, something that's very simple, cleaning my desktop, let's say every fifth day. So I know it's going to take me just a few minutes. It's very easy, it's explicit and measurable. It will give me great satisfaction to be my computer desktop all nice and spiffy. It's personal. It's something I know that I like, starting my day with a clean desktop. It resonates positively, and it's something I can really decide. I do it every fifth day, and I put it on cue in my calendar. What we know from neuroscience, if we do micro resolutions on a regular basis, they really become a reflex activity. So they no longer require attention and effort. They just come up spontaneously. And we know the brain embeds them, usually depending on the frequency of behavior, pretty much after 5 or 6 weeks of practice. And so today we've seen over 15 possibilities of micro resolutions. And I'm ending on the key question: is there one small thing that we've seen today that you could adopt as a micro resolution? And we now have just a few minutes for questions and comments, so I will stop sharing now.
Thank you so much, Rochelle, for your presentation. For sure, I'm sure all of us can think of things that we could do, especially as a micro resolution. I have to admit, this is my second time seeing you speak. I saw you last week, and I have tried to incorporate the cold shower at the end of my hot shower. It's hit and miss, but each time that it works and I do it, it's amazing. So I thank you for that. Does anybody have a comment or a question that they would like to share with Rachel? It appears that we're okay. I thank everybody who's here for participating in this webinar, and we are going to end it today. And I wish you all a lovely, lovely afternoon.